the creative journey. It's easy to get lost, but don't worry, you'll lift off. Sometimes you just need a creative pep talk.
Hey, you're listening to Creative Pep Talk, a weekly podcast companion for your creative journey. I'm your host, Andy J. Pizza. I'm a New York Times bestselling author and illustrator, and this show is just everything I'm learning about building and maintaining a thriving creative practice. Let's get into it. Today, Brad and Kristi Montague are on the show. I'm very excited for you to hear it. Brad has been a longtime friend and internet buddy, supporter of my work. We've been friends for a long time. Brad was on an earlier episode, a much earlier episode of this show, episode 72, I believe it was, one of the first guests on the show. And Brad is an excellent guy, and him and his wife, Kristi, have been making some incredible picture books. You might know them from their gorgeous, heartwarming kids' books like Fantastic Bureau of Imagination or their New York Times bestseller, The Circles All Around Us. You also might know Brad from his web series, Kid President, from back in the day. And in my estimation, Kid President is one of the most hilarious, inspired, and successful creative things to ever live on the internet. I'm talking billions of views, collaborative episodes with freaking Steve Carell and Beyonce and Obama, for goodness sakes. Like, this thing was just an incredible force and for so much good and light on the often very dark internet. And in the past few years, Brad and Kristi have been really focused on making wonderful picture books. And I wanted to have them on the show for a couple of reasons. First of all, they have a new picture book out called Fail-a-bration. It's hilarious and also just really powerfully illustrates a key concept from this show and from the book Mindset by Dr. Carol Dweck. It illustrates the idea of the growth mindset so well. And we talk about that idea so often on this show that I had to have them on to talk about it. And I think it's an amazing thing to bring this idea to life through a story for the target age range of the picture book, because it's such a make or break concept, both to creative people, but also to kids and also just humans everywhere. And I think learning to embrace failure is such a game changer. And it's something I need reminded of all the time. The second reason I wanted to have them on the show is because I don't know anybody that makes picture books in such a similar fashion to the collaborative process that Sophie and I have, my wife, Sophie and I. They make books in a very similar fashion. And I was just desperate to compare notes and see what I could learn from them about how they collaborate and see what other kind of lessons and ideas we could pull out, because that collaboration in my own practice has been a complete game changer. Some of the best things I've ever made, some of the things I'm most proud of have come through that, but it hasn't been easy. It's been enlightening. Sometimes it's been easy and often it's really just magical, but it can also be really difficult. And so I wanted to talk to them about it, see what they had learned. And we have so many powerful takeaways on the collaborative front in this chat. Stay tuned until the end of this episode for a creative call to adventure. I'm calling it the first word on how to approach your creative work in the opposite way that most people do. And by doing so, making your art something that people integrate into their lives on a deeper level and become the agent for spreading your work throughout communities online and in real life. And I think there's an important shift that we talk about in this episode that can really help you make work that spreads instead of trying to make stuff that is the final word on what you're doing. We'll get to that later, but for now, let's get to my chat with Brad and Kristi Montague. Honestly, I loved the new book. It is so funny, and it feels so much like your spirits. I'm like, I loved your other books. They're great. This one has that comedy, though, of that, I don't know, there's something about failure that is just right in your comedy wheelhouse. And it was fun, and it's growth mindset, and I just freaking love it. So first of all, I wanted to just say that.
Well, there's compliments, and then there's compliments from you, people that I love and have known me for a long time. And yeah. And there's you know what this is like too. You make stuff until it starts to kind of feel like closer to what's inside you and around you. Yes. You've done that a lot.
Oh, completely. Yeah.
And I wondered if that was the case for you too, like if it felt, because I mean, your heart and soul are in your previous picture books, but there's something about reading this that bridges, and it also bridges the gap between, like it feels so fresh, like closer to what's happening on the internet. And often there's a big gap between traditional media and like new media. And I feel myself, I have a hard time like getting past my preconceptions of what a picture book needs to be. And I wondered if you felt like you were on to something different, or you tapped into something different with this book.
I think what helped is it was so disarming, the fact that we were working on a totally different book. And this one was like demanding to be made. Yeah. And so suddenly it had this energy to it that, I mean, it just came together much quicker than anything else, because like we were working on a book that took place in the woods, and there's all these animals, and there's all sorts of painting and things that have to be done with that, and this big story. And I've been, so much thought going into that. And then suddenly this was just urging itself to exist. and so we couldn't be in our heads too much. And at the same time, we were reading a lot of James Marshall, and you like love James Marshall as much as I do. And I mean, like that kind of energy of the fun, the silly, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because Fail-a-bration started as an event, and it kind of took on a life of its own. And then this book, I feel like, kind of took on a life of its own, where it kind of, I don't know, the words and the way that we wanted to be playful with it, it just kind of dictated the way that we ended up putting it together.
It was less of us forcing it and more of it forcing us to get to work.
Yeah. Yeah. And I totally relate to that. I feel like, the majority of, I think a lot that making good work, or making the work that feels best to you, is so much this mind game of how do I access this part of my brain? And there's so many weird hurdles. And one of the things that seems to work the best is like procrastinating, where you're like, all right, we have to do this thing and it has to be good. And then your brain's like, well, what about this other thing that's totally irrelevant? And if you just let that go a little bit, sometimes it gives you something really, you get in there in the back door. Could you tell us a little bit about... So
your advice to all the creative professionals listening right now is
procrastinate. Procrastinate. I mean, honestly, it doesn't matter whether that's my advice or not. That's what we're going to do. I just think there's no way around it. There isn't.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of how this book happened.
Yeah.
I mean, a year ago, last July, we were talking to our editor and agent, and then it kind of turned into like, well, could this be the next book instead? And then like a month later, he had a manuscript. And then 2 months later, we were working on the art. And It's crazy.
It's such a tricking yourself thing. You have to figure out, how do I get, that's why I always look at my to-do list. And I'm always like, okay, all these to-dos, none of them are that difficult. The difficult one is getting past myself, like to get these finished. So I think,
get over Andy.
Yeah.
Well, so the party itself was a thing that, I just wanted to get people together. And I was a little stressed out about doing an event, bringing people together, and all that barrier to, well, what if people show up? What if it's like, doesn't meet their expectations? And so to get over that, I made the event about failure so that it could be messy and scrappy. We could spell our names wrong on the name tags. The playlist could be dumb. Like Weird Al said, dare to be stupid. And that was the mission. And the people that were presenting, I invited, people who've done impressive things, but they could only share the thing they wouldn't want to share on stage. And in doing so, we found that not only did the people in the room resonate with the idea, like emotionally, I mean, we were laughing, but crying, and a big room turned into a living room, that kind of feeling. But then like people just started going back and wanting to do their own parties like this. It just was freeing in a way that people went, oh, finally, I wanted an excuse to do something dumb.
I always want that. That's also great.
Finally.
I have an excuse for this one. Okay. Brad said I can do it. I think that, there's so much interesting stuff there. So it's Fail-a-bration. It's a picture book inspired by these events that you were doing, where you're telling stories about failures that different people had. And then in the book, it's really about helping kids embrace failure as funny or learning or not an identity. I think it's really amazing. I wonder if, just real quick, we could go into two things you did there that I think are really interesting creatively. One is, there's so many times where I want to do something, but I'm like, oh man, an event, what if people don't come? What if it's embarrassing? What if I, forget some of the basic things like chairs, like that kind of stuff. And so then I just don't do it. Yeah. And then I just don't do it. And there's so many other, this could be anything, an event, a book, a podcast, whatever. And I think that rather than try to get around the problem, you creatively embrace the problem in a way of like, well, what if it was a failure? And that was like the whole concept, like it's a concept party. And I just think that is such a good, like, again, a hack of the creative mind, because for me, I can just kill my ideas before I even get started. So I love that.
Yeah, it's a habit of creatively approaching life that way, of being playful, and when you sort of have this we forget how fun can be. We just get so obsessed. You forget, oh, this is fun. Oh, I like this. And that sounds like one of those dumb things that would be on a podcast. Did you know fun is fun?
You know what fun is? It's fun.
This needs to be the excerpt you share to promote this really deep music in the background.
A lot of people don't know this. Fun is actually fun. Thanks, Brad.
So you're welcome.
That's great. But you're right. I mean, especially like the amount of times that when I have to do a video for a company or a talk or an illustration or whatever, how many times I get into that zone of, all right, I have to go do a video. I have to go do this thing. And every time I forget that the whole idea is that it's creative. The whole idea is that I have to have fun. Like, what am I doing? Yeah. And it's very easy to forget.
That's a thing I have to kind of actively remind myself that if I'm unhealthy, my default is fear. But when I'm at my healthiest, my default is fun, and which is joy. And that's where like my favorite work comes from. And, Corita Kent, that nun artist, just brilliant woman. Yeah. One of the things she talks about a lot was her students' best work came when they were playing, and she called it plork. Like, you've got to plork. It's this mix of play and work. And, I mean, you got to get plorking, man. You got to play.
That's great. I also am envisioning it as a character, plork.
Plork. He'd make a great invisible thing.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I love that. And I love Sister Corita Kent.
Yes. Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. What were we going to say?
I was going to say, even, for whether it's a young person or an adult going through a challenge or feeling disappointment or, experiencing some sort of perceived failure, to then move from a fearful framing of it to this fun place of seeing it as some sort of opportunity or seeing it as some way in which they can grow, is going to lead to some really good places, and sort of planting those seeds early in a picture book or in conversations or in games and is helpful. But it's also this helpful reminder for the parent who would be reading the book to be like, oh yeah, I really should loosen up a bit here.
Yeah. People won't believe this, but I too need that reminder. Like, most people think I need to tighten up. But I do. As a parent, it's easy to get into like, I got to do this and do the dishes and oh my God, like I totally get in that zone. I want to get into a little bit of like what causes people like you two to throw a fail-a-bration, and if we can get into any of the real stuff around that, because I know you and I, we've been making stuff for a long time. Some of it is really fun. Some of it didn't go the way that we hoped that it would. And so I'd love to dig into that. I just want to underline one other thing real quick that I thought was super interesting right at the top. You guys have done a lot of like event gatherings, like campaigns. And I just wanted to point out that you turned an event into a kid's book. And I think a lot of times, myself, I get into this zone of like, the muse wants this to be, I never say the muse, first of all, just let me say that. Okay. I was pretending. But I'm like, the muse wants this to be a podcast episode or this thing, get really precious about it. But often a lot of the ways to kind of break through is to mismatch what it wants to be.
Yes.
Like, was that in your mind, like as you guys were translating this?
There was some tension early on when it was even suggested to me that, this is a book. And I mean, I was just kind of like, no. Yeah. What is a book is the book I'm working on that is very serious. It has rabbits in the woods with newspapers. That is the very serious. It's very like serious about it. And then the more and more I start thinking about it, and then it really gets serious when Kristi starts going, well, they're kind of right. And I'm like, not you too. They got to you. You've been infected as well.
Yeah, it was like a 30-minute meeting. And from the beginning of it, he was just like, no way. Like that wouldn't work too. Oh, maybe. Yeah, let me think about this. And then like a day later.
Then I emailed the manuscript, Is this a thing? And and the fun starts to kind of come when you play with that, when you go, oh, I actually was pitching this as a movie, but it kind of would be more interesting in this setting. And that leads to some of the most interesting things. And this becoming a book suddenly made so much sense, because core to what I love and what is contagious to me, like I'm addicted to it, is stories that inspire more stories, or creative projects that inspire more creativity. That, it started when we were doing work on YouTube, and we would do something like throw a parade for our postal worker and then see hundreds of parades happen within a month. And go, oh, a parade is cool, but a parade that inspires more parades is even cooler. It's generative in that way. And this is the exact same thing. It's a party that could inspire more parties. And also the book itself is made out of these really cool things that I feel like the way you I did these drawings, and then she makes these paper sculptures and is tearing cardboard together and hot glue and things. And you look at it and the kid's going to go, I want to make a thing too. And they feel the barrier is not too high for them to attempt it.
I love that component of it, by the way. Sophie and I have done collaborations in the past with, obviously, Invisible Things. This is part of the reason I was really excited to talk to you about it, is you guys have a similar thing happening over there with these picture books. But she's a fabric artist, and we've kind of explored different times adding my illustration with her fabric and this dimensionality. And so seeing you guys do that was extremely inspiring, and it looks fantastic. It works really, really well.
Yeah. Like, talk about how you did the playing with the cake and stuff.
I think we've been so inspired by books, like The Beautiful Oops, and like ones where it was very tactile, and our kids always love those where you can like touch them. And so even in Fantastic Bureau, we had a page where, it was torn open, like it looked like there was a piece torn out of it. And so many people would like touch the page and like think it was real, and we loved the way it printed. And so we just kind of wanted to turn in, use a little bit more of that in this book. And so really it just started with playing with everything, and kind of taking Brad creates sketches the way that we work. And I take those sketches and then either color them or whatever, we do to be able to turn them into finished illustrations. And so with these, I just started cutting out a paper, and I would print them out and then just kind of trace and figure out like what, should these be? And then I loved the way the shadows were showing up whenever I photographed it. So it was just a lot of play, and then just kind of seeing what came out of that.
But
that's great.
She is a perfectionist.
Yes. There are so many that I like redid, or I kept having to like I would photograph it like 3 times, and then I would put it in the computer, and I'm like, nope, that's not going to work. Okay. And then I'd have to do it again.
But you have to go, hang on, this book is about, like, it's okay. Yeah. And so it was a bit of tension there of you allowing the imperfections to still exist in the book.
Yeah, that's something I struggle with. And so I guess needed to address and addressed throughout the process of this book.
So that hits on the next thing I want to talk about, which was one of the things I really relate to in my collaborations with Sophie is I can get in my own way. It's hard to access different parts of my brain, like the creative parts when I want to, because of ego or whatever it is that's gotten, insecurity. There's all kinds of different things that stop me from accessing that creative side. And even in this conversation, you both played different roles and then swapped them. Like you talked about Kristi, like, this is actually maybe a book. And Brad's like, that has to get Brad out of the way. And then you're struggling with these perfectionist tendencies, and he's now getting that person out of the way. That, to me, working with somebody so close to you who knows your crap, knows your tricks, like it makes it, honestly, I've been really open. Like, it makes it difficult. Like, it's not easy, but it's really can be super powerful and rewarding. How does that dynamic work out, do you think? Do you know, Kristi, when Brad's like, it's not a book. Like, what are you, this is dangerous, but what are you recognizing, or what are your tricks? Like, how do you get around it? We don't have to go to counseling, couples counseling here, but it's an interesting thing for all collaborations,
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. I think it's funny because we are so much alike, and I think we complement each other so well. And a lot of people are like opposites attract. I'm like, no, we are alike in so many ways, except for he is a dreamer and I'm a realist. And so he will come in with be like, yeah, we're going to do this. And I'm like, okay, but practically, I don't know, this isn't going to work. And so even with Fail-a-bration, he's like, I have this idea and we're going to do this event and it's going to be this. And I'm like, okay, but, and then I introduce all the problems that we need to solve first. And so I think whenever I'm excited about something and I bring it in, I think he really listens more because I wasn't immediately shooting it down. Like it was like, no, this is a book. And he's like, wait, what? Okay. So I'm actually like,
it's like when a dog hears go,
yeah.
like, yeah. Like,
oh, okay, we're doing it. Let's go. Yeah, I get it. Yeah. I get that totally.
Yeah, I mean, it's that clouds and concrete kind of thing. That's kite and string. That has a negative feel. But
yeah, it's a positive thing. And that's what I always feel like we joke about, that like I'll crush his dreams whenever he'll come in and have some big idea. I'm like, no, it's really not that. It's just looking at things you might not have thought about, you know, and just making sure that we address all those problems ahead of time. So
yeah, but then it's like, oh, she's in on it. Then that means, oh, it must be good. Because, you know, out of 100 ideas, one of them goes through, and then she goes, actually, I think that's a thing. And usually I'll get grumpy about it, but then I'll be like, okay, we'll do it. So he had an idea a few years ago for like a karaoke backpack. And he was just all about it. Like, we got to make a karaoke backpack. And I'm like, I mean, I think that'd be great, but that means I have to figure it out. So like, fine, okay. And so then we built it. So yeah, but it was great. And it was awesome at the end, but I mean,
that's something that had to be invented. That
had to exist. Yeah.
The faces of people when they got to sing karaoke and they saw it. Yeah. It's worth it. It was worth it.
You know what's hilarious is it's so similar to my partnership with Sophie. We wrote in Invisible Things, there's 2 pages that came from conversations we had with our editor about head in the clouds, feet on the ground.
Yeah.
Like that was exactly it. And it's interesting, like when you have the honesty too of someone close that you're collaborating with, yes, it's frustrating how often things get shot down back and forth. Like we're each other's toughest critics for ideas. But when something goes through, I feel exactly the same, because if we both turn the key and we're like, this is good, we know we have to like go through with it. It's a really powerful motivator.
Yes. Yes, it is. It is. And there's something really cool that can grow from that sort of binocular vision of having people see it from different angles and then coming together. And it elevates the whole thing. It elevates my work when she comes and takes the breadcrumbs and says, we're gonna do this. And then I have been able to help her, you know, play more and bring an energy and a kind of, color to what she longs to see in the world, and kind of understanding that about each other, about what is it really longing, what's the energy you're really longing to add to the world in some way, and kind of finding some way to help each other do that.
Yeah. We're in a really bright spot, so let's just take a nosedive into the darkness. Let's go straight into what makes one want to celebrate failure. What kind of scenario, we, like we've said, we've known each other for a long time. We've talked a lot about the ups and downs of trying to have a creative practice. I know from my experience and know from just things we talked about, it's not all fun and games. And sometimes it's really, really hard. What did you guys share a story at that first event? Or what was the catalyst for that? Why did you want to do this?
It's a combination of lots of things. One being, you know, you've interviewed lots of people, so you know this sense too, that it's really fun to talk about the kind of resume pieces, the things that you did, that you made that cool, like that's nice. But then when you get to kind of do those conversations that's about the detours, or about the job that didn't go right, the company that they, you know, wrecked, the audition that was so bad that it's now studied by a school as how not to audition, which is what our friend Sarah shared that story. You're like, oh, that's like, now I'm learning about you. I'm learning about humanity. I'm learning the good
hilarious
stuff. And I was sort of thinking about like, man, I would, it's cool when they do, interviews with CEOs about, what their dreams are over the company and where they're headed. But it'd be far more interesting if business school was just all, hey, here's what this guy did that just was a disaster. This was a fiasco. Don't do that. And that's what I want to hear from people. And then I started to realize, like, I'm with kids a lot, and I don't tell them the things that went wrong or went sideways. And it was a principal of a school in Oklahoma who was telling me a story of seeing his kids. He was doing a guided drawing of the Grinch around Christmas time. And he saw kids, happily drawing. And then he saw a big crowd of them like start to crumple the paper up or hit the table and getting frustrated that their drawing didn't look like that. And that he was explaining to me that was one symptom in which he saw over and over again that there was this bubble of perfectionism that needed to pop, this stressful idea that they had to be perfect or do exactly right on a test, and that sort of anxiety bubbling up, and then learning that 1 in 3 kids deals with anxiety to such a degree that like they can't function. You're just going, whoa. Like, as bad as it affects us, like there's children growing up and hey, we got to change the conversation about this is part of the process. And sometimes it hurts and it's disappointing, but we can kind of help each other grow through that. So what if school was a safe place to make a mistake and grow? What if like they understood that there was a community around them, that there was these, this way through to kind of playfully approach problems, and to not avoid failure, but to fail better. And I mean, it's something that I needed, but I know you, like, this is like a book you would have.
Oh, I would have loved it. Yeah. I think one of the things too, that even working on this book that I've realized is that, one of the things I love about Brad is that he is not afraid to try things. And so we have had so many different things that we've done, like weird rooms we've ended up in just because of him, calling somebody or messaging somebody on social media and being like, hey, I want to interview you, or I want to talk to you about this. And he's tried so many things. And so he's also felt like, oh, I failed a lot, because a lot of those things he thought, oh, this will be the thing. Like, he created lots of things before he created Camp President. And he told me once, like, yeah, I thought every single one of those was the thing, like that was going to take off. And
I can relate so much to this.
Yes.
So it's difficult to hear almost, but. Yeah.
And one of the things that I've realized, though, through working on this, like, as we've been trying to think of like, oh, what are some stories that we could tell, like, out of Fail-a-bration, I feel like I don't have that many stories. Like, I was like, I haven't stepped out of that comfort zone as much as he has to really try things and to, do something different and to get out there and actually fail. And so I think that's something that was an important lesson for me to learn too, and just be like, oh, well, what am I not trying? Like, I should be failing more than I am. So what can I get out there and actually start doing?
That's really interesting. It's interesting.
Dr. Pizza, we just had a breakthrough.
What?
In this counseling session.
Not a real doctor, just in case, I don't want anybody asking for more therapy.
I want my money back.
I mean, it's a really interesting kind of turn that I wouldn't have thought about if someone prompts you, like, what are your failures? I wonder even if there's first of all, like, do I have any? Like, what are they? But then also how, speaking of therapy, how repressed are they? Or like, can I even think of them? Or have I just detached myself from them? And, like you talk about in the book, these are like the prime learning experiences. And then also as creators, those are our prime stories, because the further I get into telling stories and just kind of loving storytelling, the more I feel when I watch a movie where the protagonist gets what they want from the start, I pretty much feel like I think this story's broken. Like I really do feel like that. And especially if it's satisfying. if they get what they want and they're satisfied by what they want, I'm like, I'm not sure this is a story. So, the getting in touch with these failures is both a learning experience. Also, getting comfortable with it is a powerful thing. It's interesting. I've definitely mined a lot of my failures because I'm always trying to find stories to tell on the podcast and on stage and stuff like that. But it's a really interesting, like collecting failures as proof of trying.
Exactly.
Is a really great idea.
Yeah. Like a good scout receives their badges, there's, I realized maybe I should have remembered to feed the goldfish. I realized maybe don't carry my daughter's Lego set that we worked on all day with my own hands and really quickly on Christmas Day and then drop it. That's what
Can
happened.
you imagine if that actually happened?
Oh yeah. If somebody did that,
that would be just, worst dad of the year. But are you now you got to do demerit badges. That's basically for failures. And speaking of the goldfish one, I was going to ask you, there's so many funny failure examples in the book. I wondered what both of your favorite failures were in there, and then I'll share the one I like the most.
Well, one for me was hugged the wrong grandpa.
That's mine. Dang it.
I have a memory of doing it with my aunt. I thought I saw my Aunt Shelby in a mall. Was not Aunt Shelby.
I hope this wasn't like last year. That would be a real problem.
Oh, no, that would be. It would be.
Aunt Shelby, get off! What are you doing?
We were in a mall. There's a lot of people, and it was
another of Brad's failures.
She was like, "Oh, what is that?" Oh, I was like, oh, "You're not Aunt." It's a whole thing, and yeah.
Yeah, when I read "Hugged the Wrong Grandpa," I was cracking up. That's fun. It's hilarious. And I love the goldfish one too. What do you remember what the line is?
Oh, he's giving a speech to his friends, and he says, "And that is why you should always remember to feed your goldfish." And his bowl is empty. Yeah.
And then he's just carrying the bowl around.
He's just carrying it around. Yeah. I love.
That's another metaphor. Like put down the bowl. Okay.
Bowl.
Move past it.
Yeah.
That is really funny. Kristi, did you think of one?
Yeah, I think the kid that ripped his pants, like while he was trying to dance in front of his friends. And so that one was fun too, because we just ripped the paper. And so it's like his pants are actually ripped. Yeah.
He looks also like he's doing a pretty sweet dance move when it happened. So it kind of feels like it was worth it. It was art.
Yeah.
Beauty is worth it. Yeah.
I love it. And ripped pants is always good. It never that's just a classic. You remember that part in Parks and Rec where Jerry rips his pants?
Oh man.
That was
Anything
I was like,
with him.
this is the lamest joke ever, and I'm crying.
He just had this you love him. You just love him. You want him to be okay. And it's just all these just derpy things happen around him. It was really satisfying though to see that he had a beautiful family at the end. You know, it's okay.
He's actually he's the happiest of all. I wanted to talk about, I'm glad that, I'm glad there was something to what I was perceiving about how this book really feels like it captures the worlds that you guys create online and your creative voice in a fresh way, like in a way that I hadn't seen in a picture book. And I'm glad that you guys were feeling that. I wondered, for me, every new creative project comes with its own sets of failures, but also, hopefully, most of the time, there's something that feels like, oh, this is a breakthrough. Like this is a creative thing that I'm really excited about. Was there, for this project, is there something that kind of shines as like this is a new breakthrough moment for us creatively?
I feel like the flow between us felt like the easiest on this book. And I don't know if it just comes from working on multiple books together or if it was just the way we worked on this one, but it just seemed like it really just like moved so easily and seamlessly, I guess, from him to me and then back to him. And I mean, where we just kind of like were able to work on it in such an easy way and without much communication even. I feel like it worked out really well.
Yeah, it's like a just level of trust gets built up over time. And, I have a friend who's a golfer. I'm not a golfer. You're not a golfer either.
No
right?
way. I don't think I could possibly do that.
I'm down with, colorful pants. We can be team colorful pants. We can just get together.
Smack a golf ball. Like I could do a driving range thing maybe.
We could do it. Maybe let's just start a, midlife guys who like colorful pants club will hang out.
Okay. I like that.
But my friend, he plays golf a lot, and he said what keeps him going back is he's just good enough. Like he gets just enough that he's kind of like, next time. And I felt that way with books where it's like, it's almost like what was in my head, almost like what we were going for. And this one did the same thing. 'Cause the last book we had so many, layers and textures and things that we were trying to create by hand and these worlds and characters and it's like, we almost got it to what was in our heads. And this one, we got to do it again. And now we've got that itch of, we almost had it feel like they're in the workshop with us. And so the next book will have even more of that. So kind of hooked on that feeling of, almost got it.
I love that because I feel like it gets into that, kind of creating for the sake of creating energy. That's that intrinsic motivation that keeps you going. And by the way, your other books are fantastic. They do really different things, but I did just notice like, this is a little bit of the humor side that I know that there's some funny stuff in the other ones too, but this is just there. Every step of the way, you're adding another layer.
Well, I was afraid, I'm always been afraid because humor is can be perceived so differently. And I didn't want it to distract from any messages before. And I didn't want, and yet when I'm reading in a classroom with kids or I'm with people, I add the jokes or these little asides. And so more and more you're going, it needs to feel like it's as if we're with them. And my favorite books are funny. Like they just are. And they're the ones we reread over and over. And my favorite drawings are funny drawings. My favorite, and so that's
kids' favorites are funny things.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, there's actually like a whole back and forth because I just kept adding mice to every page, like wanting mice. And the editor was like, maybe it's just humans. We don't need, I was like, and so I started a whole PowerPoint presentation of why the mice were vital.
You got to keep the animals in this book.
And I finally just wrote I just like them.
Yeah. No, I like them.
But that was a thing that I'm learning to chase and defend more as joy and leaning in towards those things that, this just is lighting up every light in my brain of this is fun. This is what I want there to be more of. And if the book is an invitation to have less fear and more fun and see failure as not catastrophic, but as a catalyst for creativity and goodness, like, it needed to be silly too.
The other thing that came to mind a lot when I'm reading it was, this is very, adjacent to the really important literature around things like growth mindset, fixed mindset that I think is really powerful and important for everybody, including kids. And I think this, the thing that you brought up about how much more seamless the process was in the collaboration reminded me of how in my own collaborations, how over time that happens as you learn how each other works, what each other is good at, and what your preferences are, all that stuff. And, when I first started working with Sophie, it was really choppy and awkward in the way that we were trying to do a creative process. And I was trying to tap into that growth mindset that said hard isn't bad and that it doesn't mean that it's not right, and trying to hold on to, but every time we do it, it gets a little bit better. Like everything we've made is better than what I could make on my own and better than what we made before. And so, it reminds me of the kind of the themes of the book, because that's one of the things I always say when people try to collaborate with people that are close to them or not. It doesn't mean that it's supposed to feel easy from the first go, or that it's supposed to just work like kismet. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
There's some tension. That tension is good, and it can be healthy, and it means that you're chipping away at the unnecessary and finding the vital. And it's interesting too, along the way as we're like working on this, growth mindset came from this researcher, Carol Dweck, and her student actually just wrote a book that furthered that study to, growth mindsets about individuals. And this new book is
Cultures of Growth.
Cultures of Growth. I always say the title.
You caught it.
And the whole spirit is it's how does an entire culture grow? And that's through communities of growth where it's safe to share things that it's safe to share and grow and mess up, but have a collective growth mindset. And classrooms are the perfect place to model that. And my hope is that, the kids growing now will, their imaginations will be furnished with an image of what it looks like for people to grow together. And it's not just an individual growth mindset, but how can we, have everywhere be a place where you can dream and help others dream, grow and help others grow. And that, it doesn't mean it's always going to be utopia. It's going to be, but there'll be problems, but we will work through them together. And that's the idea of it's not about not failing. It's just us all failing better. And that means not doing it alone. And one of the first images that I worked on for the book is a spread of a kid who's wrecked his bicycle. And I was thinking about those religious paintings where it's a strip, of a whole bunch of people in different poses or whatever, but where it's the drama is not, oh, he's not being picked up, he wrecked his bike and it's a tragedy. Instead, it's this group of people just waiting for him to realize they're there and that they've also failed too, and that they have something to offer him just as he has something. And so that was like this image that I thought, I've seen that stories can create more stories, and I've seen that the images we put out into the world can become more images like it. So that's an image that I want there to be more of, kids realizing they're not alone and there's a whole bunch of people ready to help pick them up, and they can be part of either side of that, and they will be. Some days they're the kid that wrecked the bike. Some days they're the kid helping the other. So we take turns.
I love that. I was thinking about one of the things that I've tried to develop in myself, and then I've talked about on the show, is that I've noticed a lot of values that work to your benefit creatively are kind of contradictory, and they require muscle memory and discernment to know which is needing to be accessed at this moment. So if you read about success, the two things you're going to hear that are in theory kind of polar opposites are grit and pivoting. They're and so how do you know when you grit and when you pivot? It's very complicated. And I've learned you can learn the kind of difficulties that are the good kind and which are the bad kind. Sometimes it's just experimenting, creating little tests so that because you can't always know. But I love what you said, because it adds to the tool belt for discerning the difference between the good hard and the bad hard. And it's having people around you that can help you notice, like, you're banging your head against the wall and it's not really going to help anything. Like, that's just bad. That's bad pain. Versus, I know this doesn't seem like a book, and it might be hard to do that, but Brad, could we try? Like, could we make it into something? Could we try it? Like, I think that is such a really good tool, is having that outside point of view.
Yeah. I mean, creatively, what has changed things for me is when I have decided to involve more people and open my arms and welcome people in instead of being closed off, and inviting people and playing together and letting that lead to somewhere, whether it's a video, whether it's an event, whether it's a book, that becomes the place where it can grow from. Really, it's healthy ground for something really good to grow from, when you've got a lot of voices that you believe in, they believe in you, and they bring an interesting view to it. Then all right, let's play together. Let's see what we can do. And I've been trying to do that more. I want to do it more.
Kristi, do you when you notice that the collaboration isn't in the healthy difficulty stage, have you learned things that help kind of jumpstart it back into the right direction?
I think time is helpful. And if we're not procrastinating, then we have that. But sometimes with deadlines and everything, it's like, okay, we got to figure this out, and getting
You're
it done.
accidentally writing another book.
Yeah. And you're like, I have like 2 months to get this done. And so trying to make sure we have enough time built in that we can kind of work through problems. Like, because I feel like a lot of times, especially when we're butting heads over something, if we can just step away from it, even for just a day, and then come back to it and look at it again, it's like, oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. I see why you're saying that. Let's do it this way, or whatever. But, I don't know. With this one, I don't feel like we even really had much of that. Like, there were times that you were like, oh, it's fine. And I'm like, no, it needs to be reworked. Like, I've got to redo the spread.
Messier, make it messier.
Well, and like the bicycle one that he was just talking about, like when I first photographed it, I had like two of the characters overlapping and it was driving me crazy. And I was like, no, like it's blocking, this one character. And I'm like, the way they're overlapped, it's got to be fixed. And so I ended up like redoing that one right before we turned it in. Like we had already turned everything in and I'm like, wait, okay, there's one more spread that I've got a new version of.
Oh, and then the ground we switched out because it just didn't feel
it was
right.
like we just kept reworking
only mattered to us. One of those things.
Nobody would
like, this got to happen. But
that was a huge learning curve for me where sometimes I'll go in with we're going in with our own standards. And what happens there is you can have a misconnection in your mind where it feels like you're arguing like, this is the important thing. And that person's like, no, this is the important thing. It's like, we need to just finish this spread. No, we need to get the like, and then I realized over time, like, what's good is that we're taking care of the standards of separate things. Like we're both, and that's what actually makes it better. We're not needing to argue about this is the main thing. This is the main thing. That can be your main thing. And this is my main thing. And we recognize that. It's really, it was difficult for me to learn.
Yeah. Sometimes even like finding a balance in between them because like there are things that Brad does a really great job with sketching of like creating like a personality and creating kind of a feeling or things like that where he can capture the energy of something, but then like I'll look at it and be like, okay, but a body can't actually be in that shape. Like something's off. Like the legs is just not working. And so it's like trying to capture what he captured, but also in a way that actually makes a little bit more sense. It's like, okay, like if I can change the knees a little, but still, make it feel the energy it had. I don't want to lose that, but trying to find a way that your body can actually get in that shape.
Yeah. And though you get too, like, I love the spontaneity of a line, like, and sometimes it's just impossible to replicate. And, and so keeping that pure while finding where the other parts are that you can articulate or switch in some way where the spontaneity is still there so that it
where
does
the character doesn't have two knees, but you still have kind of some flavor. That's tough.
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah, so that's why our next book will just be a multiverse kind of thing, or it's multi-need.
Like, yeah, they got 18 fingers in that universe.
Yeah,
it's cool.
yeah.
That's great. So, okay, we usually end with a call to adventure, something you can act on. And the thing that I am really inspired by from you guys is this. I'm noticing how unusual it is for creative people to make something that causes other people to make stuff, especially in the world of where art meets commerce. It gets really scarcity and really, it's easy to get in this place where what you made, you want to be the final thing in this direction. I did this, so nobody else can do this. And this notion of, I made this book so other books like this will be made. I made this party so that other people would try parties like this. It's such a flip. And I think it's served you all really well over the years. It's been a beautiful thing. I wondered if you could give any tip on how to notice, how to turn that up with an idea that you have and let it be something that people can run with. It reminds me of like the Grateful Dead. One of the things that's attributed to their success and ongoing success was like early on, they made a decision not to crush their fans' bootlegs. And it really caused this ownership and this pride and togetherness around it. And obviously that's just what's made it endure, even past the band members being alive. Like it lives on with these people.
The guitar strap from the band just released an album. It was the wildest thing.
And so I wondered if you could, because you guys have a lot of experience doing this. You've done these kinds of things a lot. I wondered if you could talk about either how to recognize an idea like that or how to take an idea and maybe inject some of that into it.
I think a big part of it is perspective. And I think one of our friends once described Brad as a Pied Piper. They're like, Brad is just like the Pied Piper. Like he just constantly is creating things for people to follow and like get behind him. And I'm in. Like they were like, yeah like whatever he does.
I love it.
That story is
in
important.
A good way.
That story ends tragically.
But,
teachers don't read into that. Okay.
But I think one of the big things with Brad is like everything he creates, he wants it to be a party that everybody's invited to. And so I feel like a lot of the words that like Kid President said that, Brad created were just about, I'm not in a party, I am a party, but like, that's you. Like you want to create that party and you want everybody to be there. And so I think his perspective on everything is just to approach it that way.
Well,
do you, Kristi,
that's very nice.
Have you noticed though, like, even if that's Brad's nature, because this is one of the things sometimes like I can train my brain to see things like, something in my brain that tells me when I'm moving through life, notice that kind of thing. And it's like the yellow car thing where you're like, there's no yellow cars. And then you think that, and then you see like 10. Do you think because of Brad's nature being that you have also learned to pick up those kind of threads?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think that's something too, is I think he pushes me out of my comfort zone a lot. I mean, I think there's, the whole dreamer and realist thing. There's a lot that I would have just been like, oh no, there's too many things like that would make that difficult, but he pushes me to see the possibilities and to, figure out like, okay, yeah, we can do this. Like, let me think through it, but we can do this.
Well, that's one of the things that, you remember the show Pete and Pete, right?
Yes.
Nickelodeon, 90s, The Adventures of Pete and Pete. Best show ever.
Serious Brad energy right there.
Okay, I'm obsessed with it. Love it.
I believe
it's the best show. There's an episode of that where little Pete hears a song and it's this band. He loves it. And then the band is playing in his garage and he hears it and it's just like obsessed with it. Well, then he can't find the band. He can't find the song. So the whole episode is about him being so obsessed with hearing that song again. And it is so beautiful because then it ends with him just finally creating a band. And it's the happiest, most joyful ending of him creating his memory of what that song was. There's another movie, Rambow 2, or what is it? Son of Rambow.
Son of Rambow.
Or it's a kid who saw Rambo like through, and it's him trying to recreate seeing Rambo from his memory. There's something about like Robert Frost talked about, poems begin as a lump in your throat.
Mm-hmm.
That you have such a strong desire for something to exist that it overwhelms even your abilities to bring it to life. So that's what drives me, because I am not the best illustrator, and yet I want this thing that's in my head to exist. And so I'm overwhelmed with the dream to bring it to reality. And so and I also loved the liner notes to the Velvet Underground album, that when they did a re-release of the self-titled one, Velvet Underground and Nico, where somebody wrote that their first album didn't sell that many copies, but every person who bought a copy of it started their own band. And it's like, what is more powerful, And that they tapped into this well of creativity and said, hey, you're invited. You can do it too. And it unleashed more music on the world. And so that's cool to me. That's like, hey, the well of creativity is deep. Like, there's so many stories to tell and so many things. So let's tap into, what is that thing you want to exist? What's that feeling? What's that lump in your throat? What's that song that you just can't, Shazam's not going to dig it up for you. You can't. So you've got to make it. That leads to really weird places. Nobody asked for it, but here you are.
Yeah.
Go.
So usually anytime we do anything, Brad starts it with being like, oh, nobody asked for this, but I got to create it. When we did Fail-a-bration, like the very first one, we're like getting everything ready, and we had pulled in a friend, Holly, to help us create this whole stage scene and all this stuff. And he's realizing how many people are now involved in this and how many things are happening. And he's like, nobody asked for this. Nobody asked for this. And I'm like, but it needs to exist. And so
you hit that point in any journey where you're just like, oh no, how did we get into this? I didn't ask for, nobody. That documentary where Werner Herzog's trying to pull a boat over a mountain.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
A Burden of Dreams, the title of the documentary about him making Fitzcarraldo. And, he's roped all these people into doing this, and it's dangerous. People are exhausted. They're yelling at each other. They're in the middle of the jungle. But he has this vision of, the boat must go over the mountain. And it's insane, but I get it.
I am really inspired by that, because whenever I speak to creators that are in situations that feel uninspiring, maybe they're in a job where the creative problems are solving, or they're not even creative problems. That's a stretch, are not exciting or inspiring. I always talk about the biggest opportunity to really exert your creativity is the least inspiring situation. And it is the place where, if Nike comes and says, hey, can you do a 10-story mural with a team of people? It doesn't even take that much creativity to do that. In that moment, when you get that really juicy, creative opportunity, you're just like, all right, let's go, play easy. But the things that totally turned my career into a different direction were the times where nobody was asking me to do that. And it was the least inspiring scenario, because I'm making a t-shirt or I'm making a podcast that nobody said they wanted that. And that's a very trusting the voice inside that's asking you to do that is a really difficult thing to do.
Yeah. And then I see so many truly brilliant people get stuck on thinking they have to get it perfect the first time. And that even it doesn't have to be fully formed. Just iterate, do the thing, make it. And I keep learning that I don't have to really knock it out of the park this first time. We just want to throw a party. Okay, well, let's do it. And if the worst that happens, we get together and we had some snacks, that sounds like a great night.
Yeah.
But if it grows into a movement where there's people in how many countries now?
Yeah, I think we're up to 20 countries.
20 countries, every state except New Hampshire and Rhode Island. Get with it.
Anybody
it's
in
all
those
perfection
states.
there, though. That's
Get with it.
Throw a Fail-a-bration there.
But it grows, and it's following that desire to add beauty or to add joy, to add something that lights you up, that you want to transfer that and add it. That always leads, like the stuff that I resonate with, that people are creating, whether it's a song or an image, a book, an album, whatever. It's usually something somebody was like, if only I could add this noise, this joy to the world, and then they find they're not alone.
And I think the book is a great example of this. I think, I think teachers and parents are going to love it, but even better, kids will love it. It's funny. There's ripped pants in there. There's
ripped
mentions
pants
of dead goldfish. Like, it's really good. And I'm really proud to know you two and to be able to watch. I've got to watch so much of your creative journey, and it's been really inspiring. So thanks for the new book. Thanks for continuing to show up and fail and succeed. Thanks for being here.
Dude, anytime, Andy. And we got to hang out with Kristi too.
I know.
It's the best.
It's great. It really, soften your edges. It really helps. It really helped. Just really did. Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much.
Okay, y'all, don't forget to go get a copy of Fail-a-bration wherever you get your books. Hopefully an indie bookseller, if you can make that work for you, but wherever you get it, go get it. Wherever you get those books, go get Fail-a-bration. It's a hilarious book, and it illustrates such an important idea that I think is important for adults and kids alike. I'm back to talk about our creative call to adventure this week. We're calling it the first word. And the idea here is that it's the opposite of the last word. I think when I go to make something, or when I see other people go to create something, often we're trying to get there first, man. We're trying to get there first and be the last, put our stamp on it, be like, this thing is mine and nobody better touch it. I got the last word on this topic or idea. And I'm so inspired by the way that the Montagues continually try to be the first word. They try to be the start of a conversation. Fail-a-bration has sparked all of these events throughout the world, and I guarantee that people are finding ways of making it their own and making it meaningful to them. And it reminds me, like I said in the interview, of bands like the Grateful Dead who let their audience participate, who let their audience be part of the band and make merch and make bootlegs and all that kind of stuff. And you don't even have to go that far for it to be worth it to you. For me, this has looked like things like when we post the Invisible Things poster, which is a project that's really central to my work, we'll often be like, tag which one is you. Just finding this way to invite people in to have ownership and excitement about making it a part of their identity. I think about this a lot. Like the bands that I loved the most weren't just bands whose music I thought sounded good, but they were things that said something about or taught me something new about who I am. And I used those bands in a way as shorthand for my identity. I often joke, like when I was a teenager, I'd be like, if someone was like, who are you really? I'd be like, I don't know, but I'm a Modest Mouse fan. And that told you something about who I was. And that kind of relationship with a band or creator is the kind of thing that we're trying to steward and cultivate in our creative practice, because not only is that just good, sustainable practice, it's also a way to make the work a lot more meaningful, because it becomes not just about me, but my connection to my humanity and the humanity of other people. And I think the Montagues do this brilliantly. So my call to adventure for you today is to think about, how can your next post, how can your next book, how can your next song be the first word in a conversation that is ongoing? How can it be just a conversation starter instead of a conversation ender, period, dot, the end. This is mine, back off. How can you flip that on its head and be someone who sparks other creations with your creation? Each episode of Creative Pep Talk is designed to help you maintain a consistent creative practice. If you're trying to transform your creativity from an infrequent hobby into a real discipline, sign up to our newsletter at andyjpizza.substack.com so that you never miss an episode. Creative Pep Talk is part of the Podglomerate Network. You can learn more at podglomerate.com. Massive thanks to my team, Sophie Miller, for content editing and co-writing, to Connor Jones of Pending Beautiful for editing and sound design, and thanks to all of you for listening. Until next time, stay pepped up.